Hi there, and welcome to the first topic in our 10-part series on changes in material management. I'm Richard Rahn. And what we're going to do is go through the top 10 list of things that have changed from, say, the mid-90s up until today. And the first one on my list is called Two-Bin Kanban. Now, a little bit of history. Lean is sort of like a religious tradition where it wouldn't be unusual to see a lot of different schools evolve over time. And so the school that I was raised in was something called DFT, or demand flow technology. This was an Americanized version of the Toyota production system that a lot of companies in the 90s were embracing, from General Electric to American Standard to General Motors, to a lot of companies were embracing that particular approach to lean because it was Americanized. They didn't use a lot of Japanese terms, and it was very formalized, kind of a step-by-step approach to implementing lean. So that's how I was raised, so to speak. And for us at that time, Two-Bin Kanban and Kanban were the same thing. Implementing Kanban for materials was the two-bin system. And the philosophy or attempt was to put everything into a two-bin methodology, everything that made sense, into a two-bin kind of format. Now, what happened when I started visiting Toyota in maybe starting 6 years ago or more is when we started talking to them about the two-bin system, we got a deer in the headlights kind of look, like, huh, what? Didn't quite get it because the idea of restricting everything to two bins just didn't seem to make sense for them. And so, of course, that got me investigating and finding out more about what they were doing internally. Now, what are the pros and cons? Let's take a look at that. So the pro of two-bin is it's always two bins. So in terms of storage, that's easier to handle because you're never, ever, ever going to have more than two bins. That's the max allowed. Also, if you're explaining Kanban to people for the first time, the two-bin concept is maybe a slightly easier to understand and demonstrate. You have two bins and you can just show them how the system is going to work. Now, on the downside, and really this is almost a showstopper these days, if we're concerned about standardizing containers, and we should be, then the two-bin system can very quickly run out of gas because they may not, this quantity that you calculated may not fit into containers, or the containers are going to be very large. So if the containers are too large and too heavy, remember we have weight limitations on these containers as well. I think OSHA has a limit of, I don't know, I can't remember what it is, 40 pounds or 35 pounds, something like that, to be able to physically lift a container. That's another restriction. Now, on the multi-bin, as we just said, we get away from that restriction because we can keep the weight and the size of the container within limits, but we're allowed to have more than two of them. The downside of multi-bin, now you have a little bit more complexity. You have more bins or cards to track, and we'll talk about that when we talk about automation here in the series. How do we keep track of these cards? So that is a little bit more complex. And also in the storage, you're going to have to accommodate more than two. So you're going to have to plan for that. It's not hard, but you have to keep that in mind. For some parts you may have two, and for some parts you may have three bins or four bins or more. So what I see, generally speaking, what I see is that the two-bin methodology, again, having two bins is extremely common, but the two-bin philosophy of always trying to restrict it to two bins is pretty much gone. Now, I have seen some factories that really like the two-bin methodology because of its simplicity, and maybe that's what they were trained in as well, that are attempting, today I'm saying, are attempting to impose or implement the two-bin methodology across the board for everything. But that's pretty rare. So generally speaking, when we visit a plant and they're pretty mature in material Kanban, that the multi-bin system has pretty much taken over. And maybe for you, that's always been the case. But for a lot of people, I can say for thousands and thousands of people that were trained in that previous way of thinking, that's been a change for them. Okay, that's it. In the next topic in the series, what we're going to talk about is pulling from overseas. So stay tuned for that. How do we manage an not just a outside supplier, but an overseas supplier, and pull in reasonable quantities, so we're not pulling in a month's worth or 2 months worth of parts in one single shipment. Okay, so see you then. Bye.